All right, I have it ready. We have a few more minutes still. All right, can we get the chat hyped before I bring on our next guest, James Kettle, head of security research at PortSwigger. Done some really, really cool, awesome research. He's going to be our guest today. So when he does come on, I need you guys to hype the chat with your emotes, your HackerMan emotes, your Bounty Please emotes. Let's make him feel welcome. We have another minute before he joins, but I want to make sure you guys are all ready. If you have questions, drop them in there, but don't expect me to respond to them or ask them right away. If I skip over your questions, just hold on to it until I open it up for questions. Then you're welcome to drop them in there, and I will ask them. I will open up the questions for everybody. But throw in topics you want me to ask. I'll try and do my best to incorporate them as well. But just keep in mind that I only have a set amount of time, and I want to make sure that I really go through all of my questions and get to know James a little bit more and kind of pick his brain. If you guys are ready, I'm going to join the Hangouts. Hopefully he will join us soon here. There he is. All right, I need you guys to get it hyped. Are you ready? You guys ready? Come on. All right, that's more like it. Let's bring him on. I just submitted him. There it is. How's it going, man? Can you hear me okay?
Oh, hey, yep, I can hear you. Let me mute the stream. There we go.
Awesome. Well, hey, before we get started, I don't think I have your audio yet. I got to fix a few things. Let me fix it before I get told that where is it my audio? Chat, can you hear James?
Hello, guys.
There we go. That works. Awesome. Before we get started, man, I just want to quickly say thank you so much for joining me. I know it's a little bit later on a Sunday evening for you, but quickly I want to say thank you so much for doing this. I've been dying to have you on here to get to kind of understand your brain. And I know you don't do the traditional bug bounty hunting like most of the other guests, but you do something very, very similar that provides other bug bounty hunters to do their hacking with the awesome research you have done. But if you don't mind, go ahead, introduce yourself for those people that have been living under a rock who don't know who you are. Who are you and what's your background like?
Sure, will do. I'm James Kettle, sometimes known as albinowax, and I'm the head of research at PortSwigger. So I design stuff for Burp Suite, and I also try and research new ways of hacking websites, and then use them to get bug bounties and give presentations and write white papers and that kind of stuff.
And do you actively hunt for bugs outside of just doing your security research, or is bug bounty just a complement to kind of prove your research?
It's pretty much just for the research. Like, research is really difficult. It takes up a lot of time. I don't really have, by the time I'm done with trying to invent new ways of hacking things, I don't really have much energy left or enthusiasm for trying your SQL injection or whatever.
Yeah, you have done some really great research recently. A lot of chat wants to talk about your your HTTP desync and request smuggling. So one of the things I really wanted to ask you is, and I know it's going to be hard to explain, but could you explain to me, if I didn't know any of this stuff, can you explain it to me like I'm 5?
Cool. I can certainly try. I'm glad that I heard this mentioned on the stream about 5 minutes ago, so I've had a brief thought of it. It's still not going to make sense to 5-year-olds, but whatever.
Let's try it as
So,
someone who's in IT but doesn't know security as much. Maybe like they understand how the internet works, kind of like I know how to use Netflix and emails, for example. I kind of want to understand what is the impact, how does it work, why is it such a big deal?
yeah, sure. So people think of HTTP requests as being like letters. They think they're like standalone messages.
Okay.
But ever since HTTP 1.1, which has been around for a very long time, they're not really like that. What you've got is more like one giant, really long piece of paper, and then everyone just writes their own messages at different points on this piece of paper. And then the server has to figure out when someone's message ends and when someone else's message starts. And so if you can send, if if you can write something and you can sign it off in a slightly weird way, then the different people that look at this message will think it ends at different points, and you can basically fake parts of other people's messages. So maybe I could write the introduction to your letter, for example, which could significantly change how your letter gets interpreted and result in some pretty bad consequences, like me getting your password.
That's a good way to explain it. If you didn't prepare this, man, kudos to you. That's a really, really quick and easy way to explain it. That's awesome. I mean, the chat saying, someone saying nice
Thanks.
analogy. I want to get that out of the way.
Details.
I wanted to get that out of the way first because I knew it was going to happen during the interview. Everyone's going to ask, hey, can you explain this? Can you explain this? And I know you guys have done some labs around this on the PortSwigger Website Academy. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. So we've got some online interactive websites that you can try out these techniques against, which I think has helped people quite a lot, because of course when I released this research, that wasn't the first time someone documented these techniques. I mean, I built some new stuff on them, but a guy wrote a whole fantastic white paper on this 10 years ago, and like no one noticed. And I think part of the reason is because it's really not the easiest technique in the world.
It's not, man. I mean, I know a very tiny bit about it. Maybe out of like I mass scan for things, right? So out of the hundreds of mass scanned vulnerable sites that I have found, maybe I've been able to fully exploit 2 of them. But it's
challenging.
So I'm barely scratching the surface, but I wanted to get that out of the way because I knew chat was going to ask for this no matter how much we tried. But I want to kind of understand your brain as a security researcher. What is your background like? Did you go to school for computer science? Did you go to school for research? What's your background like before you did all of this?
Yeah, I was doing computer science at university, and I got into bug bounty hunting back then. Like that was my first security thing back in 2010-ish, when it was just Google and Mozilla pretty much.
Wow, okay.
And I think because I started hacking by bug bounty hunting on reasonably hardened targets, although I think they're harder now, I think that helped me with this attitude of I'm just going to find a vulnerability by any means possible. And you can't do that much recon on those targets back then. They were pretty limited. It's just about hitting your head against something until you manage to hack it.
Right.
I definitely rate that strategy.
So you were a computer science student, and how did you hear about bug bounties?
I read some newspaper article on it, weirdly. Some guy hacked, I think it was eBay, and got paid for it. Oh. And I found out what the technique was, and I was like, that sounds well easy.
And you said you went to university for computer science, you did bug bounties. When did you decide to make the shift from being a quote-unquote bug bounty hunter to focusing fully on research? When did that change happen?
I guess so. After uni, I worked as a pen tester for a couple of years.
Okay.
And I was kind of doing research in my spare time then, but research takes a lot of time, and I just never had enough time for an over a couple of years. I just got bored of finding cross-site scripting over and over,
Yeah. So how did you? So when you said you did pen testing, one of the things that I want to ask is, how did you learn these different concepts? Because like it's 2010, right? In 2010, there wasn't a PortSwigger Burp Suite Academy. There wasn't any pen tester labs. There wasn't any Hacker 101. Not a whole lot of educational content that was so well organized. What resources did you use to learn all these things?
I mean, the information was still out there. It was just maybe a little bit harder to find. I read R Snake's blog, Darkat's blog, Gareth's blog, that kind of stuff. There was some stuff like wasn't well known, but you could kind of discover it from first principles fairly easily. Like I for about 6 months or something, cross-site scripting was the only technique that I knew, but I discovered cross-site request forgery kind of as a result of that by myself. And I was like, I found this cool new thing, and then realized, of course, everyone else knew about it for years.
And how much of that has changed now? So when you see a new topic that comes out, or you see someone's new research or new technique comes out, and you want to learn it, how do you do it now?
I just read their research, and then I try and apply it to real systems. So generally, I'm asking the question, can I automate this? Because as in, can I write a scan check that will automatically detect this vulnerability? Like, even with like a 50% success rate, maybe, because then I can just run that scan on every bug bounty site and then find some real world systems and get the real experience that you need to actually understand the issue.
Yeah, and then it's a very valid point, because I try to explain to people why it's not so much of the automation to make money, it's more of an efficiency thing too, right? You're not just automating things because you want to automate them, it's just you want to be more efficient, so it does the basics for you while you focus on the larger, more manual tasks, right? That's why I assume why you do the scanning part.
Kind of, but it's more like, if you read about some new technique these days, it's probably, it might be a super interesting thing, and it might take a lot of manual work to successfully exploit it, but it's probably only going to affect like maybe 0.5% of sites out there. So how are you going to find those vulnerable sites? Well, doing that manually is just going to drive you completely insane.
You said you do research again. I wanted to kind of understand something. You said when do you realize something is interesting enough to dump a lot of your time into either exploiting it or researching it? How, besides your experience and your gut feelings of there is something there, are there any things that are red flags to you that you think of it being important when you're doing your research, that it points, it screams at you like this is something I need to look into more, or is it just based on your gut feelings?
It's a mix. It's probably the biggest kind of soft skill as a researcher is knowing when to abandon a topic and move on to something else. When I look at something for the first time, I'm always looking at, like, does this have potential to have serious consequences, like on a website? And then I'm looking at how many sites does this actually affect, and how much work is it going to take me to identify those websites? So I've got a kind of framework built up, so I can read a blog post on a technique, and with a bit of luck, I can take that technique, spend half an hour writing some code, and then just run it on the bunch of real websites and find out, is this some hypothetical vulnerability that's basically useless, or is this something that actually works in the real world?
And is that how you pick your topics for research? Like, is that kind of a similar approach, or how does that work? How do you decide what? So, because you present at almost every black hat, I want to say every new black hat.
Yeah, I try to.
You reply and you do a CFG or CFP, and you get involved. Is black hat is that your deadline for every research? Like, do you present at black hat and then you give yourself some time and then pick a new topic for that year up until the CFP opens up again?
Yeah, pretty much. So basically my job is to present at Black Hat USA. So after I present there, I'll maybe take a month to just chill out and do some random hacking and work on Turbo, Intruder, and that kind of stuff. And then after that, I'll be on the hunt for a topic that I think hasn't been fully explored, like something where it looks like there's potential to take this technique further than it's already been taken. And then it's just a game of trying to identify as quickly as possible, does this technique have the potential to turn it into something big, or is it something that I just need to cut my losses and move on?
Speaking of
So, like,
Turbo Intruder,
yeah.
go ahead. No, I thought you were done with that thought. Go ahead.
Oh, just so how long I actually spend on the research varies massively depending on the topic. Like the thing I've submitted this year to Black Hat USA, I got pretty stuck into that in about November, and I've been working on that more or less since. But other times it will, like, I'll find something decent in like January, and if I haven't found something good by January, that's when I'm starting to panic, really.
So I'm really trying to understand this. So when you have this, let's say you have a research topic right now, are you proving these just genuinely by going after bug bounty programs and hacking organizations that allow you to hack them to as a part of your research? Is that how you prove that this vulnerability exists at a mass scale?
Yeah, pretty much. And they also, the websites, like vulnerable websites, let me explore what kind of challenges you'll run into when you try and exploit these vulnerabilities, and what kind of pathways you might end up taking. So they help me kind of build a methodology to help other people use this technique.
Very cool. That's awesome. Speaking of Tuber Intruder, I want to understand, how did the idea of creating Tuber Intruder come across? What was the reason why you guys added Tuber Intruder, and I kind of want to hear the backstory to that if you don't mind sharing.
Sure. Good question. So back in my first year of pen testing, Tough, who I always looked up to, released a tool, or I heard about this tool of his called Skipfish.
Okay.
This is a web security scanner. It's pretty old school, hasn't been maintained in a while, so I don't know how many of you guys have heard of it. But if you've ever used it, you'll probably know what happens is you run this tool, and then it pops up with a status panel, and it says it's sending 20,000 requests per second, and then you like hit Control-C as fast as you can, but the website's already gone down. And it's amazing at taking websites down. So I used that, and I used Burp Pro, and obviously the Intruder there is reasonably fast, but there's this massive speed difference in between Burp's Intruder and Skipfish. And so eventually, a couple of years ago, I did some research to find out why there was this speed difference, and to try and make something that could go as fast as Skipfish. And I ended up with something that can go faster, which I was pretty pleased with, even though it's coded in Java. Yeah.
Why Java? I want to know. Why is Burp? And were you a part of the decision making of using Java for Burp?
I was not part of that decision. What I can tell you is, at the time, it was going to be Java or .NET, and the way it happened, it was Java. Yeah. People say Java's slow, but for the Java's like a really unfashionable language, and I'm not going to defend it that much, but I will say it gets more flack than it deserves, and you can write things in Java that are very fast, like Turbo Intruder.
I mean, yeah, Turbo Intruder is a good proof for that, right? That's a good example of things to write in Java. You said you weren't involved in the decision making for it being Java and Burp. When did you learn? When did you join PortSwigger?
I joined PortSwigger 6 years ago, 2014.
Can I ask how that happened?
Sure. I was just working as a pen tester full time and thinking, this is kind of cool, but is a bit repetitive.
Yeah.
And I never liked getting sent on client site and having to put a suit on. And then I saw PortSwigger advertising for a security researcher, and I was like, well, that job sounds perfect, but I'm not really qualified for it. But then I was speaking on ActiveScan plus at a conference that I went to, and ran into David there, and it ended up joining them as a result of that.
And that's how you guys ported that into Burp Suite eventually?
Yeah. I mean, it's not ActiveScan plus isn't a core part of Burp Suite,
right.
but the concepts that were in it in the original version are now in the core version.
Interesting. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So 6 years, that would be 2014. That's right about when bug bounty started becoming officially a thing.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very cool. What's your favorite research you have done so far?
I mean, that's got to be HTTP desync attacks. I honestly don't think I'll ever top that research. I mean, it could happen, but there's only so many topics out there.
I think I agree. With the stuff you do with PayPal, especially, like crazy amounts of bounties coming out, big corporations that got targeted because of it. And I know those are just the public ones are just a few that have been disclosed, and I know there's a ton of other companies that were targeted after your research was dropped.
Yeah.
How does it feel to be behind such a big research that gets widely used by, just for me, it's I have only exposure to the bug bounty community that I know widely uses your research. I'm sure that's not the only place it's getting used, but how does it feel to be the person that's came up with these topics that's been widely used now by a ton of people out there?
It's pretty cool. I guess it's almost like when I see people, for like 9 months, I was pretty much the only person that really understood this technique and knew it existed. And then suddenly I make it public and I see other people using it. So if that's a little bit weird, if you see what I mean, but it's cool really because it means it's going to live on. But by the time I was getting near the end of that research, I was just really bored of using request smuggling because I just used it on site after site after site, and it was just getting repetitive. And I was really happy to move on to something else. Although as soon as I released it, I got a million people saying, "Can you help me hack this company? Can you help me hack
Right,
this?"
of course,
And no,
naturally.
sorry, I got other things to do.
Yeah, somebody in the chat just saw a comment coming up. What was the story behind it? Was it just purely reading the write up, or was it just like? I just want to know what sparked the fire in you to want to do, because it doesn't seem like a simple topic. Not like your other research is simple, but this looks like one of the most complicated things you could have researched. Outside of it wanting to take on the challenge, what sparked the interest in this topic?
It's a good question. I touched on it a tiny bit in the intro to the presentation, but so a guy, Regilero, did a presentation on HTTP request smuggling in 2016 at
Okay.
DEF CON, and I saw the presentation at the time. And my thought process, this is really embarrassing, but my thought process was literally, this technique sounds amazing. And then I was like, but I don't understand the slides properly. I don't understand this technique. It looks really difficult. And then I was like, you know what? It's not exactly web security, is it? I
Right.
think I should leave it because I'm a web security researcher, which is the worst logic possible, right? Basically, I was too scared of it. And and then when I did the cache poisoning research at the start of that, everything was going like, I tried loads of ideas and all my ideas had failed, and eventually I had to try cache poisoning, which I knew was going to be difficult.
Okay.
And I discovered that actually, basically, the more scared you are of a topic, the better it is to tackle that topic. And so after I'd done the cache poisoning, that made me go, hang on a second, what about this other technique that I was super scared of? I really should have a shot.
Interesting,
And that
man.
was how I ended up spending the vast amount of time that it took to understand that.
Do you actively look for? I know you're a busy guy, but do you actively look for web vulns in bug bounty programs at all?
Not really. I don't like just say, I'm going to hack this company. I mean, I do very occasionally if I get like bored, I guess. But I would, my style is more to take a technique that I think is underappreciated and then say, I'm going to try and apply this technique to a bunch of sites and see what happens.
I see a comment in chat that says, how do you find white papers and old researches that are interesting to you? Where do you go look from? Do you just Google for it, or do you go through Twitter and look at people's old posts? How does that come around?
I mean, I read I read and watch all the stuff that gets released at conferences. That's a decent starting point. And I monitor Twitter for blog posts and such like. And the key thing that I think that most people don't do is, if I read a good blog post by someone, I will find them on Twitter and I'll read all their other blog posts. And that strategy is really effective, basically. And like, read everything that they cite,
Oh,
There's
so
no
you're
kind of magic there.
yeah, so you're not just reading their blog posts, you're reading the resources for that research as well to understand at a higher level. So you don't just stop at reading that blog post. You're going through whatever has been cited at the bottom. You go through those to understand how they are connected in some sort.
Yeah, like the key error is people just focus on the new stuff, on the really new stuff, and they miss blog posts that were overlooked by everybody when they came out. So if you can spot those by like reading the whole blog, just because someone wrote one good post, then that can work out really well.
Interesting.
Like, yeah. For example, if you want me to name one, there's a bunch of techniques on Homakov's blog that are totally underappreciated currently, I think.
Yeah, I haven't read up a lot of his blog posts, but I know I've heard of Homakov a lot. I'm gonna see if I can drop his blog really quickly in the chat. If someone in chat, could you have access to drop it? Somebody also asked you. So you do this research and you report it to companies like PayPal, right? Do you tell them this is a part of an active research? Or I'm not saying that it gets leaked, but you go after so many programs and so many different targets, and a lot of times this is research that you're working on. How do you prevent it from leaking in general? Like outside of bug bounties, do you share any of it at all with anybody, or is it just a small circle of researchers that you trust? How does that work?
I only share it like fully internally within PortSwigger, like with Gareth, my colleague. He helps me out quite a fair bit.
Okay.
When I'm reporting it, originally my thought was, well, if I don't say it's research and it's a novel technique, then they might not realize and then it's less likely to get leaked.
Right.
But actually, that approach doesn't work because it can result in them leaking it by accident because they don't think it's sensitive.
Right.
So these days, I just put a little message saying, yeah, I'm planning on presenting this research at this conference. Please don't share it up till then. And over all the years I've been doing research, there's only been one time when that has not worked.
Wow, that's good. That's good odds.
Yeah. I think the threat of people leaking research is kind of slightly overblown.
Yeah. And then one more thing that I ask, and I would never ask you this, but I'm gonna. Anything you can tease us with to what to expect in this coming year? Should we expect more craziness out of your research? Can you drop us a hint, perhaps?
Sure. Obviously, I can't give you any details, but over the last few years, I did Cracking the Lens, which was on exploiting vulnerable front ends, web cache poisoning, which was basically about exploiting caching front ends, and then HTTP desync attacks, which was about exploiting the conversations in between front ends and back ends. So after my last talk, I was thinking, I really need to do something a bit different and not just focus on these systems that are chaining multiple web servers onto each other.
Okay.
But then the way it happened, well, there's going to be one more year like that.
So
that is worth.
We're up for another roller coaster ride. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Well, all I can say is I'm excited to see where your research comes out. I look forward to it, man. I wanted to see. I hate to ask you like, hey, can you give us a teaser of your your next research? But especially after the things you've done the past few years, now I'm kind of waiting for that black hat update to see what you're going to come out with. That's really very well done.
Cool, thanks. Actually, I can say one other thing on it, which is last year with HTTP desync attacks, I was a little bit concerned about the potential for that, about the way you can do accidental damage when you're trying to test a server, but you're accidentally hacking live people. This year's technique, one of the techniques is so much worse.
Oh boy. All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it at that for now. I'm very interested to see what it's going to be, and I look forward to seeing what other companies you have on with this time around. I'm sure eventually, as we get closer to July, August, we're going to see those bounties coming out, and hopefully you'll disclose a few more reports like you did last year with PayPal. Those are really fun to see.
Yep, certainly.
So how do you, I've heard this, I don't know if this is I don't know how to ask this, but I hear that when you score a big bounty from your research, you don't just keep the bounty and you do some fun stuff with it. Do you care to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So we had a when I joined the company, there's obviously a kind of a problem if I get the bounties personally that I earn when I'm working, because I'm gonna start focusing on earning more bounties, right?
Right.
Rather than doing research, which doesn't necessarily earn you much money in bounties. So we set up a deal where whenever I get a bounty, 50% on that goes to charities that we vote for internally, and the other 50% gets spent on work socials. So stuff like go-karting, axe throwing, that kind of stuff.
Holy crap, that's a lot of money to be raised for charities.
Yeah, in the last year, certainly. They're doing all right.
No, last year, certainly, yeah. With desync stuff, the HTTP desync stuff, I'm sure you've raised quite a big, large lump sum for charity. That's really awesome. Kudos to you. And if anyone's watching, encourage you to do similar approach. If you can afford to donate to charities and you make a ton of money, that's very, very cool to do, man. I personally appreciate that. I work with a lot of charities, and it's very cool
Sure.
to see you guys raising so much money, because I've seen some of the payouts that have came out in the past year just on looking at the activity. That's a very, very good cause. I personally appreciate it.
All thanks to PayPal.
So let's go through the regular bounty. I usually have a regular format. This is a little bit different when I interview you, because you have a very, very unique profile. Not only you do research, you come into bug bounties, you kind of prove your research and make some money from it. You donate to charity, obviously, to do a recap. But I kind of want to understand a little bit more, just you as a hacker, not security researcher. What are, first of all, how long have you been hacking or been in the industry for?
About 10 years, give or take.
And just for me to understand, outside of the university, do you have any certificates that you've done in the early days?
No certificates.
What's your take on certificates? Do you think it's a requirement, a good thing to do? You can learn on your own?
I think I don't think certificates should be used by companies as like a HR barrier kind of thing. But I don't think they're bad to do either. Just do one if you want to, I guess. Like if just look at where you want to be, what role you want to be in, and go, what certificates, if any, do I need to be there, and just get those.
What advice do you have for people that are both new to hacking or want to become a security researcher like yourself? Do you have any advice you can give them on how to get started, things to get good at?
Sure. So I get asked this one quite a lot. So I have a whole blog post on the topic called
Okay.
"So You Want to Be a Web Security Researcher." But the shortened version is that if you want to do research, if you want to find new techniques, then it's really important to get information from a whole bunch of different sources. So bug bounty hunting is great, but if you work as a pen tester as well as bug bounty hunting, then when you in your pen testing role, you'll see a whole kind of different type of website, and you'll get more privileged access to different things. And if you can mix that up with stuff like code review too, then you'll be in a really good place to have a kind of a thorough understanding of how stuff's working and start to find some really nice bugs.
You said something about code review, and that's something that I usually ask my guests. Usually, is do you think coding is a big requirement into becoming a successful hacker? I think it's a requirement for security research to some degree, because as you mentioned, code review, you probably need it to find some of these more deep vulnerabilities that you can't just do a black box approach to. But you think is that important, or what's your take on it?
Well, I'm not going to name any names, but I know some extremely successful hackers that can't write a line of code.
Guilty.
So it's definitely not a strict requirement, I think. But the approach that I take to research is completely built around writing code to find stuff. So I think it's totally worthwhile, I would say, but it's not something that you have to do. So if you can't, then I wouldn't say give up hacking.
I think it's
Just
a good
focus on what you
investment.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I personally, I'm guilty of being one of those people. I can write some code, but if you give me a code review, there's little tiny stuff I can do. I can understand the basics, but I wouldn't be able to read every block of code and go, "Oh, I know exactly what this does." That's not something I can do. But I want to also, I think there is a. I don't want to say it's an excuse, but it's that fear of I don't know how to code, then I'm probably not going to understand how hacking works. When you don't have to understand the code, you just have to understand what it does or be able to assume what it does because you have spent countless hours learning the wrong things until it fucking worked.
Yeah, is especially black box hacking. There's no code. You're just watching. You're just watching what's happening in Burp Suite, basically.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of Burp Suite, being a part of the team that um, created Burp Suite, I kind of feel dumb asking this question, but how often do you rely on Burp yourself when you're doing your hacking?
I use it very, very heavily. Anytime there's a performance improvement in Burp Suite in the handling of like 50 gigabyte project files, that kind of stuff, that's probably something that I've requested personally. I use it. It's useful as someone that writes code because stuff like URL parsing, just sending requests, putting payloads in the right place, coding that manually is quite a lot of work. So having Burp Suite as a platform for it, and then just being able to write an extension is very time efficient.
Do you have any? So let's do this. Do you have any extensions or add-ons from Burp that's not written officially by you guys that you use? What are some of your favorite ones for people that are watching?
I make heavy use of Logger++ and Flow. That should be that that functionality should be in core Burp Suite, but it isn't yet. But we'll get there.
So Logger plus plus and what Flow?
Yeah, it's the same as Logger++, but it's slightly better for desync attacks because it shows requests where there's no response.
Okay.
Which is handy sometimes. And then if I have to test, I mean, the cool thing about the BAP store is there's extensions for loads of like niche tasks. So the other day, Burp Enterprise got a new GraphQL API, so I used a couple of BAPs to test that out.
Very cool. And outside of Burp Suite, are there any tools that you use regularly for your hacking when you're doing bug bounty for fun, or just when doing security research? Are there other tools that you rely on for people that are watching?
Not massively, because I mostly use tools that I've written, really.
Right.
There's probably, I'm sure there's one or two, I just can't remember them off the top of my head. I use Nmap quite a lot.
Of course.
Oh, and okay, so for my research, if I want to send a payload to, sometimes if a scan check is quite complicated and I need to send a sequence of requests and parse the responses and stuff like that, then I'll use a Burp extension. But maybe I just want to take a payload and send it to 50,000 websites really fast. And for that, I use zgrab, which is a really cool tool. I would highly recommend zgrab to people interested in bounty automation.
People are asking, do you use param miner, mass scan, any of those?
I use param miner. I started out with mass scan, and I was implementing the functionality that I wanted into mass scan, and then I realized that zgrab already had better version of that functionality.
Wow, interesting. Um, your take on OWASP Zap versus Burp Suite?
They're both tools that have their uses.
Okay.
Obviously, as a Burp Suite guy, Burp Suite's going to be my main driver, and I would suggest that everyone keep it that way. But it's absolutely worth knowing how to use other tools. There are some scenarios where Zap will outperform Burp. For example, if you want to send a word list down a WebSocket, Burp Suite won't do that yet, so use Zap for it. I think this idea that we kind of hate each other is a little bit overblown.
I don't think I didn't know that at all. Actually, I didn't take that as you guys hated each other. I look at it as Zap being just a free version of Burp, and I think it's a good place to start if you can't afford to buy Burp. But then again, I use the community edition on all of my streams on purpose, so I can show you don't have to go and buy it in the beginning stages of a bug bounty hunting if you don't have the money yet.
Yeah, the community edition is pretty solid. For my first year of pen testing, I used the community edition somewhat shamefully.
Yeah, I mean, I get Burp license from work, so I have it on my when I do my bug bounty hunting for legit bug bounty hunting, I use the Pro edition because I can't sit there with Intruder being throttled with the community edition. But I don't think when you first start you really need any of that stuff. When you first get started in bug bounty hunting or even web hacking in general, I think the most you're going to use is the repeater and the proxy, and both of those are free, absolutely free on the community edition.
Yep.
Very cool. Let me see. I'm trying to make sure I ask all these questions while I have you on here. What is your motivation behind all the research you do? Is it just for fun? Is it just to make the internet more secure? Is it for profit?
It's for fun, really. I really enjoy. I kind of, and it's for fun, and I kind of defeat myself here, but I kind of want to reach a point where I can just hack an arbitrary website. That would be really cool. Just be like, I'm just going to hack this website and just be able to just do it.
Is it also, does the challenge and the accomplishment feeling play a role in that?
Yeah, totally. Like the feeling of being able to hack a site and knowing that no one else could hack that site, at least not using that technique, because no one else knows that technique, is pretty cool. I get pretty excited at times at work when things are working out well.
Yeah. And then how much time are you spending on security research? Like, you've got to be spending are you doing it only during your work hours? Do you limit yourself to working your 9 to 5 so you don't burn out, or is it just however long you feel like working on this research per day and then you come back to the next day? Do you have a routine or anything like that?
I pretty much just work on it 9 to 5. Because basically, because it's quite intense, so by the time it hits 5 o'clock, my brain is basically fried and I just want to play Counter-Strike or something.
Speaking of which, and how do you, so is that how you, is this how you prevent from getting burnt out on doing these research? Because, you've been doing this for years, right? There's got to be times where you just exhausted from doing this research. How do you deal or cope with it? Is it just that you have this strict schedule that helps you out, or do you take long breaks after a while that you present? How do you deal with the aspect of burning out?
I guess having the fixed schedule probably helps loads. And there's some other stuff that I do at work that probably helps that. So like, I'll have a week where I'll make zero progress with my actual research, but during that week I will have also designed some academy labs and maybe worked with Gareth on some of his research too, and that stuff is not so difficult. So it's not like I don't have very many days where I feel like there's a total failure there.
Do you have days where you find research that you gave up on at some point? Has it ever been that at all? Like when you found a topic, you spent some time on it and you kind of abandoned it and went after something else?
Yeah, I do go back to old research occasionally, but not very often, because I think I tend to spend too long on stuff. So by the time I give up on a topic, I kind of hate it.
It makes sense though. I think you spend enough time to realize there's nothing there for you, and you just kind of put it in the icebox for a little bit. And if you go back to it, you go back to it, and if you don't, you don't.
Yeah, there's other stuff like I'll just take a break and then do some work on Turbo Intruder or Program Minder, something like that. Like I've always have some easy tasks that I can do that aren't too challenging to just kind of chill out a little bit. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, you mentioned you played Counter-Strike. Any other hobbies outside of playing Counter-Strike when you want to take a break?
I do quite a lot of cycling, bit of running, that kind of stuff. I want to do an Iron Man within the next couple of years, but we'll see if I get there.
Holy crap, that would be fun. I think that would be a fun challenge to set yourself up for.
Yeah, yeah. Not getting much swimming done at the moment, but
Somebody in the chat is asking, how did you transform yourself from being a pen tester or bug bounty hunter to a security researcher?
there was just the job offering, and I just went for it. That was pretty much it. But I was doing research from before I even started pen testing, really. So you just got to spend time and say, I want to try and find some new techniques or find something that's underappreciated and build on top of it, really. There aren't many people hiring for full-time security researchers, sadly.
Yeah.
Although we are at PortSwigger currently, so.
If you're watching this right now, or if you're watching the VOD, make sure you check out their website. I've seen you guys are looking for someone in UK, right? It has to be local to where your offices are.
Yep, near Manchester.
Very cool.
Although we're all remote at the moment, of course.
Of course. So you said the transformation from bug bounty hunter / pen tester to a security researcher was a job offer. Prior to the job offer, were there people that you looked up to in the research community, or did you have mentors? Anybody who inspired you to take up that role? Anybody you want to give a shout out to, pretty much?
Totally. I mean, Elcam Tough was my original, I want to be this guy.
Okay.
But then Serdarkat, Kuza, R-Snake, Gareth Hayes, who I'm very privileged to work with now, Homikov too, all you just see them just pumping out amazing research.
How does it feel to look up to someone and now work with them?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's really good. Yeah.
Very awesome.
Like your image of someone when you read their posts is often not exactly what they're really like, but it's awesome.
How did it feel the first time you met Gareth? Someone you looked up to, and I'm sure getting to meet him and ended up working with him must have been, a very cool feeling, right?
Yeah, it was really cool. There's still repeated moments where I'm like, Gareth, have you seen this new technique that I saw this guy tweeting about? And he's like, yeah, check out my blog post on it from 15 years ago.
Oh, that's great. I gotta reach out to him. I think that's another great researcher I gotta pick their brains on. But that's very awesome, man. I've done almost all the questions that I think would be applicable to you. But the way I end my interviews usually is I like to do a
quickly.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
There was one more thing on the topic of becoming a researcher. It's anyone doing security work can do research. You see loads of pen testers, loads of bug bounty hunters. They will do a great piece of research and then they'll just go back to their normal stuff. It isn't like you can't do research if you're not in a full-time research job. I think the way most research happens is someone's pen testing something, they find something weird and cool, and that's the research right there.
Yeah, I think I can. Yeah, I think I can see what you mean. It's just wanting to go the extra mile, right? You can either say this one thing is weird on this one website versus saying, okay, this same exact behavior might also work on other places, but you just have to figure out how to identify it and exploit it and that sort of thing. I think that's very, 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 very valid in case of bug bounty hunters. So if you're watching this, you find something you find a pattern on a certain company, it pays off to actually put in the efforts and time to see if it replicates in other corporations and other environments as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Someone says stay curious, I guess, and I think that's a very good way to put it. You just have to have the curiosity inside of you to go after it.
Yeah, if you see something and you don't understand it, you need to fix that if you can. You can't necessarily, but you have to try.
I agree. That's a good way to put it. Well, before we end this, I would love to ask you some just bug bounty related questions. And then the way I end it at the end is I throw you a word. You tell me the first thing that comes into your mind, whether it's a word or a sentence. And then, if you don't mind, I'm going to open up to some of the questions that I didn't get to answer. I saw a lot of questions coming in for HTTP desync and cache poisoning. We'll go back to those at the end. I made him hold off for it. But let's get into the questions really quickly. What was your first ever? Do you remember your first ever bug bounty submission? What kind of bug was it?
Sure. First ever bug bounty I found stored XSS on YouTube by pasting like a script alert thing into every box I could find for about 5 hours.
That's great. So I assume, was YouTube your first target that you hacked on? Your first bug bounty target that you hacked on?
Yeah. It is, how it is. You do some hacking on some stuff that doesn't pay, and then you realize you could maybe crack something a bit better and get paid for it.
Do you remember how much the bounty was for that one?
I think it was $1,000, or it was between $1,000 and $3,000 anyway. At the time, I was a student, and like anything over like $50 was just blew my mind.
Do you remember what you did to celebrate getting that bounty?
I don't think I even did anything. I was just addicted from that point. I would just spend months just all my time hacking just to get that next hit of finding something else.
That's awesome. Have you had any? I don't want to say meaningful, but anything that was memorable with your bug bounty purchases? Did you use to buy, put down money for a house, a car, or buy a new computer you needed as a student, or anything like that?
The deposit for this house pretty much came from bug bounty hunting.
Cool.
But more recently, last year, I went to a HackerOne live event and made about 12K or so, and I spent that on a bike, which was a good decision.
That's awesome. That's very, very cool, dude. That's very awesome. I appreciate. I love hearing these things that people say. I bought this with my bug bounty money. I did this thing that I always wanted to do with my bug bounty money. Are there any hackers that you collaborate with when you do bug bounty hunting or your security research?
I work with Gareth Hayes quite a lot. Obviously, I sit next to him. Other than that, sometimes people will like DM me on Slack when they find something really interesting, and then I'll do a little bit of work with them on that. Most of most of my DMs are, I submitted this bug on HackerOne and it was closed as informative, but I think they're wrong. Please tell them they're wrong. But every now and again, I get to work with some top class hackers, which is awesome.
Are there any hackers you would like to collaborate with, or any other security researchers that you want to collaborate with, but you haven't gotten a chance to? Is there anybody like that on your wish list?
I'd like to do a bit of work with Inti, probably, because I just love the crazy bugs that he finds. They're really crazy.
I definitely know what you mean. Inti has a habit of going down the biggest rabbit holes and always coming out like with something with something to show for it, and it blows my mind. I don't know if Inti is watching this, but Inti, if you hear this, you might want to get in touch with James and make it happen. I think that would be very cool to see you guys do some research together, because now that you mention it, yeah, he does find some of the craziest shit I've seen at these events that we go to.
Yeah, his stuff is awesome. The other guy's Orange Sai, of course.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, obviously.
Have you met Orange Sai in person?
Yeah. I've met him at Black Hat USA a couple of times. Yeah, he's a cool guy.
Yeah. I think I've only seen him once. I would love. It would be very cool to see you guys collaborate. Maybe the three of you guys eventually could present on a Black Hat, dude. That'd be very awesome. Cool. Well, let's jump into the wordplay. I only have a few. Some of these are going to be very fun to hear your reaction to, and the other ones I'm kind of scared of seeing your reaction. So we'll give it a try.
So, refresh me on how this works.
So yeah, I will give you a word, just whatever you think of, whatever pops into your head. It could be a word, it could be a sentence. If it's longer, there's no rules to it. It's just I want to see your reaction and what you say to it. I'll make it easy. The first one I will say is PortSwigger. Not Burp, the company.
Burp Suite.
So the next question would be Burp Suite.
ActiveScan++.
Security research.
Hard work.
Black Hat, the conference.
Parties.
Parties. Life hacking events.
Buzz.
Cache poisoning.
That's a difficult one. Cache poisoning. Messy.
HTTP desync.
Resurrected.
Gareth, who you work with a lot.
XSS.
Inti.
Insanity.
Larry Lau.
Oh dear.
Logger plus plus.
Swoosh. Deadlocks.
RSDL.
Yep.
Man, I love that guy so much. He's such a cool dude. What about him? What do you think of IRSDL?
Yeah, he does really cool stuff. I think he doesn't promote his stuff like via conferences so much in the same way as some other people, which means his stuff gets overlooked unjustly, basically. And if you want, so I totally recommend checking out his work.
Chad, if you're wondering, it is IRSDL. S as in Sam, D as in David, L as in Larry Lau. Let's do two more. HackerOne.
Platform.
Bug bounties.
Burnout.
And last but not least, PayPal.
Cash.
Cash as in cash money, right?
Yeah.
All right. So one of the questions that I wanted to open up the questions for everybody, but one thing that came out earlier, and I think you kind of talked about this already, but just to reiterate, Second in Mind asked, what's the difference between the two, desync and web cache poisoning? How are they different?
Web cache poisoning is one potential impact of desync. I would use the term web cache poisoning to mean that you've got something bad into the cache. It's not really making a statement about how you got something bad into the cache. So in my research called Practical Web Cache Poisoning, I was talking about using HTTP headers supported by frameworks to get bad stuff into the cache.
Okay, I think I asked it wrongly. He repeated the question. I was trying to remember. He said desync attacks versus HTTP smuggling, not web cache. Sorry.
Okay. So part of this is when you submit to Black Hat, your title and the abstract get published before the talk. So if I title my talk HTTP request smuggling, and then I say I got 100k bounties, then in like the 3 months in between the abstract and the talk going out, everyone else is going to redo the research. And it's going to be a bit of a disaster. But on the other hand, I think the term smuggling is too strongly associated with bypassing WAFs. It doesn't really capture the impact of the issue, whereas desync, it captures the essence of the core vulnerabilities you are desynchronizing to web servers, and it sounds a little bit more scary.
Sounds good. That's well played. Very smart.
Picking the title, the hardest part, doing the Black Hat talk, for sure.
Yeah, I bet. I'm so down to get on that stage, man. Hopefully one day before this wrap this up, man, like I gotta watch this interview one last time before I push it, just because I haven't gotten to fully like understand everything that you have said, because I'm trying to like watch the chat, interview you, and like keep up with everything. But I'm very thankful for you to be here, man. I genuinely appreciate it. This was very, very fun, and I appreciate you giving the time.
It's been a good laugh.
I seriously appreciate you being here. Chat, this is James Kettle, also known as albinowax. I'm dropping your Twitter handle on there if you want to follow him. Tweet him some good questions. Please don't bother him about invalid bugs that you've sent in. But once again, let's give it up for James. Let's spam the chat with some emotes. Thank you so much for giving me your time, man. And I look forward to seeing what you have going on for Black Hat this year.
Cool. Cheers. Yeah. See you at Black Hat, hopefully.
Hopefully, man. Have a good one.
Stay safe, man.
See ya.
Take care, everyone.
Thank
See
you,
ya.
man. See ya. Man, that was a fun interview. It's kind of like it's scary. I don't want to say scary, but it's hard for me to interview someone as big as James because of the fact that he has done so much cool research, and I want to make sure I ask him the right questions. But this was mind blowing. I didn't. I don't know what to say. I'm kind of speechless. I did make 2 notes of bringing IRSDL up here and also Agari FR. Both of those folks I'm going to reach out to see if I can bring them on eventually onto the show. That'll be actually very awesome to have them both. I didn't get to ask him a lot of questions just because I was a little bit nervous and I wanted to make sure the questions actually apply to him versus just arbitrarily asking this stuff that I ask him usually. And thank you all, everybody saying good job. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's get back into looking at some of the data we collected. Let's see if the scan is done. I'm going to be online for another 30 minutes since we got done earlier than expected. Also, if you're hassling me about the giveaway, you may have joined a little too late. I've already given away some of the codes that I've had. If you are a subscriber, I'm dropping you one last one into the chat for... I'm going to drop one in the stream chat, and I'm going to drop one in the channel for subscribers as a part of my promise to you guys. So if you're a subscriber, look out for it at some point. I'm going to drop it in there. And if you are on Discord, look out for it soon. It's going to hit Discord. And if you're not on Discord, here's the link for it. Please join and look out for it. Cool. What did you guys think of the interview? Any highlights? Anything that you guys enjoyed? Anything that stood out? Is 2.0 in the community version? No, I don't think so. What are the giveaways for? The giveaway is I'm doing a puzzle. The giveaway is gonna get the first person to email me with a answer or the best write-up. The full write-up with everything solved properly, will get a pen tester lab and a you have to do all 10 levels, not just the one. But you also get a pen tester lab and a try hack me for a month. And if the stakes get higher and no one's solving it by Tuesday, then I'm gonna add one more thing to it. But we'll see. I'm stuck at level 4. You still got time. All right. So it looks like the DNS scan is done. That Go is still doing its thing. So we're gonna let it do its thing for now. But let's go, and I'm going to switch the screen here in a sec. And let's look at what's going on. Give me one sec, chat. I'm trying to... I have too many tabs open in front of me right now. One sec. Tuba is on Community Edition? I thought it wasn't. Tuba Intruder. Oh, if it is, then sorry, I didn't know. Apologies there. James is super cool. I agree. He's a very, very cool dude. I appreciate him taking the time to come on here and help me out. That was really, really fun. All right, let me do a few things. I got to do some administration.